the history of Mexico, there is a period called the colony or the viceroyalty that began in the 16th century, when the Spanish people took control over Tenochtitlan and was conquered by Hernán Cortés. This is how New Spain it was found to the territory known as Mexico. The Company of Jesus arrived to Tepoztlán in 1580. The primary work was related to the native people. They found a residence where the priests learned Otomi, Nahuatl, and Mazahua. They also restored the seminary of San Martin for the education of the children of the main Indians. Finally, they established the House of Probation so that the young people who wished to join the Company of Jesus had to start the novitiate.
Soon, the company needed a building that allowed them to exert its spiritual activities. That was the reason why from 16th century it was initiated the construction of the school, and one-third several constructed a stage and finished towards 1764. A simple house donated by the neighbors of the town became, with the passage of time, the old support of an benefactor and resort in an architectonic complex made of 5 backyards, an orchard, 2 mills, rooms, and a temple. The school was exclusively for the Jesuits. The Roman hotels were public space at the Seminary of San Martin was inhabited only by natives. The building was constructed in a natural promontory that took advantage of both 3 levels, at the moment intended at the access floor, the ground floor, and the discharge floor.
July 4th, in 1767, the school had to be left by the expulsion order that the King Carlos III had decreed to the Company of Jesus. In 1777 was constructed the Seminary of Tepoztlán by instruction of the Archbishop Alonso Núñez de Haro. The building was occupied until half of 19th century. In 1870, the Company of Jesus returned to Tepoztlán, but in 1940 they have to leave definitively by the political context of the country. Later on, the building was declared a national monument, and in 1963 the National Institute of Anthropology and History started the restoration work to launch the National Museum of the Viceroyalty that was inaugurated in September 19 in 1964.
Meanwhile, in other countries like Italy, Poland, the UK, the United States, there were contributions by scientists. We will enlist some of them. Galileo Galilei. He was born in Italy in February 5th of the 1564. In the field of the physics, he discovered the laws that rule the falling bodies and the movement of the projectiles. Between 1604 and 1609, he conceived the conception of the law of movement uniformly accelerate from the observations on a new star observed in the sky. In 1609, he improved and created its own model of the telescope. Copernicus. He was born in 1473 and died in 1543. He was a Polish astronomer and mathematician of the Renaissance. He was known by his heliocentric model, which proposed that the Sun, and not the Earth, was at the center of the universe. In 1543, Newton was born in 1642 and died in 1727. It formulates the classic laws of dynamics and the law of universal gravitation. In July 5th of 1687, he published Principia. This book was fundamental for the spreading of the Industrial Revolution.
The mechanical loom of Cartwright. In 1789 has begun to use the steam engines produced by James Watt and Bottom to move its looms, an operation that previously were moved with his hands and the feet, were now moved completely in a mechanic form. Another example is Torricelli. In 1608 to 1647, he was a physicist and Italian mathematician. Attribute to Torricelli the invention of the barometer, Also, their contribution to geometry were determining in the development of the integral calculus. Another example is Daniel Fahrenheit in 1686 to 1736. She was author of numerous inventions, such as the weather thermometer in 1709 and the mercury thermometer in 1718.
Robert Boyle. He was born in 1627 and died in 1691. He made an important contributions in the field of the physics, like the law of Boyle. He discovered the participation of the air in the propagation of the sun. He researched about the expansive force in the freezing of the water and about the relative density. Henry Cavendish, physicist and British chemistry. He determined the density and the mass of the Earth by means of a torsion balance. Nikola Tesla. He was born in 1856 and died in 1943. Tesla invented a device mentioned in the previous point, the motor of alternating current.
The Baroque is a term that comes from the French Baroque, and that allows to name a cultural movement and develop artist style between 17th century and half of 18th century. The Baroque reached diverse disciplines such as architecture, painting, music, literature. It was characterized by the excessive decoration. Francisco Becerra served the sculpture and architecture, Jorge González Camarena in the painting, Francisco de Quevedo and Luis de Góngora in literature, and Francisco López Capillas in music. There are some of the maximum exponents of the Baroque. The Baroque art arise a greatness and divine expression, in an aim to break up with the flat aesthetic sketch and to incorporate moment and angles to the different artists' expressions such as the literature, architecture, and painting. It gave a great emotional sense and ornamentation. These artists' pieces were bound to the church.
The origin of the architectonic style was originated in Europe, specifically in Italy. Later on, the Baroque would span to a great part of the continent, and when the Spanish conquerors arrived to Mexico, it began to expand with more vehemence than its native country. Thus, almost in the middle of 17th century, they began to erect Baroque construction in Latin America, especially churches and temples. The Baroque architecture in Mexico was independent from European. Due to the indigenous influence, this style acquired reasons and forms that could not have been developed in other places. In order to illustrate better our ideas, we will indicate some of the most representative Mexican buildings in this architectonic expression.
This aesthetic notion is very related to the Christian religion. This can be verified almost in a dual opposition of concepts like the sky and hell or the sin and their redemption. Some examples of the architecture are the Metropolitan Cathedral in Mexico City, the Cathedral of Puebla, the Cathedral of Guadalajara, and Catedral Nuestra Señora de la Asunción en Oaxaca.
The poetic production is enormous during this century. The language is complex and skillful, in contrast to the Renaissance lyric that is natural and simple. Still, the metric ones of the previous century are used same, with a preference marked by the sonnet, and the romance and the songs with verse of smaller art and popular character are revived by imitating the style of the medieval poetry. Two stylistic modalities are Quevedo cultivate and the culturist their own style of Góngora. He was the author of the fable of Polyphemo and Galatea. The religion, the mortality, the love, and the satire are the greatest subjects of the poetry of this time.
This movement was known for realistic sculpture in which composition of rare dynamism appeared, a dynamism that is not ordinate, but is spontaneous. It used the same type of materials such as marble, bronze, and wood. The subjects tend to be more profane and mythological, where nudity take a particular importance. The portraits regain their importance. and continued to make funeral monuments in which fame, art, are excelled. However, religious issues predominate. It often goes to the mythological search, but in addition, the sculpture becomes urban. It operates in the streets, squares, and fountains, interweaved with the architecture. It predominates the taste for the moment, the realization of free compositional schemes of the geometrics, the realismness and magnificence itself in character and essence, the importance of the quality.
Some of the characteristics of sculpture are the tendency of making representation cradle in real the human reproduction with a perfect objectivity in all their aspects, as much as in most sublime as most vulgar. The tasty but the nudity and the accomplishment of free schemes of geometrics that hits the balanced proportion of the Renaissance. Nudity was of great importance by creating compositional groups that allows the contrast of women when affecting the surface of the sculptures. Wood, metal, marble, and gold are used preferably. The graphite also is privileged.
The first professional painter arrived from Andalusia in 1538. He was Cristobal de Quesada. In 1548, the painter Juan de Illescas arrived from Spain. He was the author of the greatest altarpiece of the old Cathedral of Puebla. The flamenco Martín de Bos painted the magnificent picture San Juan riding the Apocalypse, that nowadays can be appreciated in the National Museum of the Viceroyalty. In 1640, the artist Sebastián López de Arteaga arrived to Mexico, and with him began to occur to the very particular Mexican Baroque style. Its painting, Christ in the Cross, shows its mastery to handle to the resistance between light and shadow. It can be admired in the Viceroyalty Gallery. It is so Baroque colonial. The Mexican was developed from second half of 17th century. Other remarkable painters at the time, Baltasar de Chávez Rioja, with Burial of Christ, in the Viceroyalty Gallery. Pedro Ramírez Flagelación, that can be seen in the Regional Museum of Guadalajara. Juan Correa, The Expulsion of the Paradise, that can be admired in the National Museum of Viceroyalty.
The art of viceroyalty in Mexico is found in different sites and small towns where there are convents and temples at the time. We thought immediately about the art of the wonderful architecture of those buildings, in addition to painting and sculptures in its interiors. Other cities where we can admire that type of plastic art are in the museum like the National Museum of the Viceroyalty, the Viceroyalty Gallery, or the Museum of the Cathedral of Chihuahua, located in the cellar of this temple. Reason why we can see that New Spain painting was fundamentally religious. Painters were formed academical in Europe, that began to arrive at the colonial Mexico. In addition to their work made here, they helped to form those who will be the later Mexican painters of the time.
Basically, all these include the time of the Viceroyalty and the Baroque. That was of the styles that bud and paints during that time. With all this information, we can recognize that this epoch had a lot of to say. Without any doubt, was a fundamental time for the history of Mexico, even though this period as that took place first in Europe.
I hope that this video has been introductory and useful to you about the Viceroyalty. Thank you for your attention.